for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Good evening to everybody, roasting in the last of the summer weather, even like I am here deep in the north woods of Wisconsin. Tonight's going to be a lot of fun. We're looking at the classic 1999 science fiction film, The Matrix, of course, the Keanu Reeves vehicle and made by the Wachowskis. But is it just a science fiction movie? Perhaps are there secret, ancient messages buried within the film? Or perhaps more to the point, is it just part of an old tradition? The idea of a different reality above ours that echoes down to us from ancient Neoplatonic ideas and Gnosticism. I'm sure Jason and I are going to try to get to the bottom of it tonight on Mysterious Library.
Well, hello there. It's another Mysterious Library. And Dean, I have to take issue with calling The Matrix a classic 1999 film because I get it. It's an amazing film. I love the film. But I was just in my car driving home or driving back from running some errands maybe an hour ago. And I was listening to one of the Red Hot Chili Pepper songs, and I saw on the dial it said classic rock. No.
Well, I think a movie can become a classic almost within, a year or two. It can attain such a cult following, and it can have such a significant impact on the culture that I think it can become a classic. I agree with you a little bit with classic rock from the 90s being maybe arguable, but I think a film that now is almost a quarter of a century old, which had that kind of impact on the culture, to the fact that we use terms like it's a glitch in the matrix. When you start to impact the language of the culture, I think by default you're such a significant film that you've become a classic.
Red pill versus blue pill. I mean, that all comes from there. Like you said, being trapped in the matrix, that comes from this film. My point is I'm getting older and I don't need you reminding me. And I sure as the world don't need people reminding me that Red Hot Chili Peppers songs came out almost 30 years ago. That's all I'm saying.
Can I tell you something? I'll tell you something along that line of thought, which has bothered me recently. When I've had some downtime recently, which isn't often, but sometimes I get a little bit, Probably because I'm watching a lot of documentary material for the film I'm making, because when I'm making documentaries, I like to read about documentaries and watch documentaries and stay in this
Right.
zone.
Yeah.
I've watched a number of pro wrestling documentaries amongst flying saucer documentaries and amongst general
Right.
historical documentaries, but I have an interest in professional wrestling, so I've watched a number of pro wrestling documentaries. You know how you want to check your reality and check your mortality and your age very quickly? Watch any pro wrestling documentary which is looking at guys from anytime from I'm not even talking about the ancient days of, I don't know, like Gorgeous George. I'm talking about, look at a documentary that looks at guys from not even the heyday of WWF, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Look at stuff from the Attitude Era, you know, when Stone
the late
Cold reigns
90s, early
supreme.
2000s.
You start looking, and it's like, Bret the Hitman Hart looks like, you know, he should be in, and God bless him, he's a fantastic wrestler, but he doesn't even look as bad as some, but you look at him and you think, you look like a granddad now. And then you look at other guys that you remember being just these incredibly vital, powerful, Paul Orndorff, now he's older, Lex Luger, all these guys were incredibly significant wrestlers, and they were all just like Grecian god physiques, right? They just look like the most perfect representation of masculinity as far as physically anyway you could imagine. And they're all old and, you know, like they literally look like they should be in a nursing home. And you look at it and you go, I can remember, it doesn't seem like that long ago I was watching this stuff. I can remember watching people, I can remember seeing Luger perform live, for goodness sakes, you know? And this is as an adult, not as a child. I can remember seeing the older guys, like, perform when I was a kid, but I remember seeing as an adult, some of these guys now you look at, and a lot of them are dead, even guys I saw, but even if you look at Sting, you know who's held up well, though? Hogan's held up miraculously well for a man of his vintage. Miraculously.
He has. Well, you know, steroids will do that for you. But yes, I get it. It's fine. I'm just a little touchy at the moment. I don't need to be reminded. I haven't had hair since, like, my hair started receding when I was 16. I don't need reminders that I'm getting older. That's all I'm saying. I mean, yeah, the original Matrix film is old enough to have been drinking for 3 years. I mean, that's, you know, I'm just saying I'm getting older and I don't like it. I don't know how to avoid it, but it's happening. Speaking of running out of time, though, that's a roundabout way of saying it. The virtual convention is this weekend. So we're going to run that trailer one last time, folks. This is your last call to go to the virtual convention.
Are you ready to uncover the mysteries of Bigfoot? Join us for SquatchCon Idaho 2023. This year, we're bringing the magic directly to your screen, or join us in person. Witness the world premiere of the enhanced Paul Freeman Bigfoot footage. Doug Hychek discovered a secret within this enhanced video you'll have to see to believe. Hear from an all-star panel of Bigfoot experts like Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, Cliff Barackman, Brian King-Sharp, and Michael Freeman. But that's not all. Get exclusive online bonuses such as Bigfoot-themed wallpapers, a Bigfoot coloring book, an interactive Bigfoot quiz, Squatch Nut Field Guide, get a copy of the Freeman Bigfoot Files ebook, and more. Whether you attend in person or watch it live online, you'll be part of an unforgettable experience. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Secure your spot today. SquatchCon Idaho 2023. Step into the unknown.
Last chance, folks. It's happening this weekend. It's going to be amazing. If you can't be there in person, you can be there in remote. It's going to be an amazing time.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. I'm going, and I'm not even a Bigfoot guy, and I'm going to go to this.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, real quick. Yes, it is a cruel joke played on humanity. It really is. It just is, and there's going to come a day. Not the way the globalists and elitists think it's going to come, but there will be a day when that kind of thing is going to be passé. And I look forward to that day. My knees look forward to it as well.
Tell me about it. Speaking of one more pop culture reference, I've introduced my daughter recently to Disney movies when Disney was still good. In other words, anything made up until when I was a child. And she watched Peter Pan for the first time the other day. We watched both the Disney Peter Pan as well as, I guess, the 90s live action Peter Pan, because she really liked one, and I got the other. And when you're a kid, you don't realize the significance of Hook and the clicking, the ticking clock in the crocodile's belly. But as you're older, you're like, time really is ticking for all of us, and it wants a part of us.
Yeah, you're like, man, that's a heavy-handed metaphor.
I know. When you're a kid, you're just like, oh, there's a crocodile that likes Captain Hook. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
And when you're like middle-aged, you're like, that croc's coming, man. I can hear that.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Never grow up.
A lot of valuable lessons in Peter Pan.
Yeah. But then you have to grow up, because then you get to do the next, you can't stay a man-child with, with a pixie companion forever. Wendy does the right thing, because she eventually marries and has children and continues the kind of the tradition of humanity, while Peter just gets to flit around with a pixie forever. So he never gets the full experience of life, I suppose.
That's true. Did you ever see Hook, the movie with Dustin Hoffman and
Robin Williams? Yes, so long ago. I forget it though, because I literally saw it, I think, at the cinema when it came out, and I haven't seen it since. But maybe I should revisit it.
That's worth revisiting, because that's exactly what it talks about. It's sort of exploring that idea of Peter Pan as an older person. It is a brilliantly done film. It's in many ways, it's a very loving sort of reworking of that classic story, because nothing's loving anymore with any of these new reworkings of any of these stories. Nothing's loving at all. They're all just, how do we destroy this story?
Exactly. They despise the culture that spawned it. So you can't do a Snow White today without spitting on Snow White, because it is contra to the political and cultural mores that Hollywood pretends is everybody's mores. And it's funny when this isn't a political show, so we should leave it. But when I watch the old Disney movies with my daughter again, I haven't watched them since I was a kid myself. I'm like, Hollywood used to make movies which was the general culture of America, and everybody kind of was engaged in that culture in the West. Now you get culture coming out of the coasts, which doesn't represent middle America where I live.
Yeah, no, 100%. I always point to this one scene. It's from, I can never remember the name. It had Audrey Hepburn in it, and he was in Casablanca, and I love that. I can't get my wife to watch that film with me. I love Casablanca, but she
Humphrey Bogart or somebody.
Humphrey Bogart, yeah, it was Humphrey Bogart was the love interest. It was the main lead, and she played the driver's daughter who'd come back. Somebody,
did they remake it? I think.
Yeah. They remade.
I know the film. I can't even remember. I know the one you meant. It's a person's name is the title of the film, isn't it? I think. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It's not Breakfast at Tiffany's. No. It's Humphrey Bogart. It's black and white. Humphrey Bogart is the lead. They did a recent. I say recent, but that's over probably 30 years old now with Harrison Ford.
I know. Sabrina is the movie you're thinking.
Sabrina. Thank you. Anyway, there's a scene in the original one where his brother's asking him why he's doing everything that he's doing, right? And he's like, don't you have enough money, is the lead up to it. And it's a big scene, but it's a great scene, because he says, if it was just about the money, it wouldn't be worth doing. Right? He's like, he basically says, I'm doing this because by creating industries and bringing a factory to a town, I am creating an entire economy for a town that didn't have anything. People get to go to school. There's my favorite line is, people who didn't have two nickels to rub together now have a dime. That used to be the mentality. That really was the thought people had in their heads at the time. And it's all like, that's all gone. That we did sort of embrace this very self-centered, decadent lifestyle. And it's like, it's all got to be about me, and it's all got to be about making the maximum money and selling out ultimately to these higher powers. Whereas it used to be, no, I'm building a community. You may have had a mansion, but that mansion was literally in the same neighborhood, as the people who worked in the factory. Your kids went to the same schools as the people in the factory. That used to be the way things were, and that was looked upon as yes, that's how you're supposed to do it. But yeah, we chose a different path, and we're certainly paying for it. My camera seems to be paying for it. Do you want to Matrix?
You look like you've been out in the sun. So what did you say though?
Do you want to introduce the Matrix just a little bit while I try and figure out why my camera is revolting?
Well, despite Jason's jokes about the Matrix not being a classic earlier, the Matrix obviously has become a classic, as we spoke about. It's impacted language when we say things like glitch in the Matrix, or we've been red pilled, or escape the Matrix, or any of these kind of things. But before I first saw the movie, actually, I had a good friend in Sydney who was a science fiction fan, and before I saw the movie, he said, the Matrix is just PK Dick for dummies. And in many ways, the Matrix is PK Dick for dummies, and that isn't being disparaging of the Matrix, but it clearly is influenced by ideas before it. And while I think PK Dick, who people are probably most familiar with for writing things like Blade Runner, or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, as it was originally called, and various other Hollywood adaptations of PK Dick's work, people are probably most familiar with. But PK Dick in later life had this type of spiritual awakening or crisis where he thought he was, and we won't go into the details because I've done it on other shows a number of times, but he essentially thought he was receiving transmissions from something he called at various times Valis or Zebra. And Valis stood for, I think, Vast Articulate Living Intelligence System. Anyway, he was never 100% sure what Valis was. Sometimes he thought it was an alien satellite. Sometimes he thought it was the Soviets beaming messages at him. But what he seemed to lean most to was some kind of plasma intelligence, which may have been a message from the divine and may have been part of an older tradition of Gnostic Christianity, which was sent here just the same way the Gnostics believed the light had been sent here through Christ or through Sophia or whoever they were interested in, had come here to explain to us that this wasn't the real reality. And PK Dick actually saw 1970s Nixonian reality imprinted on top of something which was still like 30 AD reality, like just after Christ had died. It was still Rome. He could see the Roman Empire imprinted upon modern time, or vice versa. And he began to think that the empire never ended, was a phrase he used a number of times. We were living in a black iron prison, that somehow we were trapped, and the reality we're experiencing was nothing. Today, you might say the hologram, or you might say the Matrix, but this wasn't the core reality. And perhaps Valis was trying to get us out of this, what he called a black iron prison, which was a metaphor for the idea that we were spiritual beings who were trapped within a very base reality. And so you can already start to see these type of Matrix ideas. Of course, PK Dick was more forthcoming with his influences. So when you read his exegesis and things like that, which I haven't read for years, but I've certainly read it, I believe he's much more conscious that this is part of a Gnostic tradition, a Gnostic Christian tradition, and he associates with Gnostic Christianity, which is different from the type of mainstream Christianity we have today. It looked at Christ's mission here different. It was a mission that was a mission of salvation, but it wasn't a mission that necessarily wanted us to repent of our sins and accept him as our savior. It was a mission saying there's a higher reality than this one, and you've got to get out of it, essentially. And Gnostic ideas intermingled with Neoplatonism at the time. Plato, of course, who most people have probably at least heard of, and if they've ever done a Philosophy 101 course, they've had him beaten into his head, was in many ways the father of modern Western philosophy. You can argue Socrates was, but all we really know about Socrates was what was written in Plato's work anyway. And from Plato spawns Aristotle and the ongoing kind of Western philosophical tradition. But what Plato suggested was that this reality that we live in here is all the objects here, whether it's a chair or a man or a dog or whatever it is just an imperfect reflection of a higher perfect version of man, a higher perfect version of a chair. Exactly. It was an idea of forms or of ideals. And so reality in that sense is almost, imagine a shattered mirror and all you're seeing are all these parts and distorted visions of the person standing over it. Our reality is the shattered mirror. And
it's Plato's story of the cave.
The cave is the most famous sample. You can talk about the cave if you want. Yeah. That's the most famous example.
Essentially, the idea here is that you have three people chained to a wall in a cave, and the only thing that they see of the outside is when something is passed in front of the light, and they just see the shadows of it. That was his argument, is that essentially our world was, and everything we encountered were essentially equivalent to these shadows on the wall. Whereas the reality, what he called the forms, were the things outside. Again, that higher reality, which, again, most people I think have heard of the story of the cave, and that's the idea here, that there is a truer reality that's out there, and everything that we see in this world is a reflection, a very base sort of reality, or simply a shadow of what really is.
And in some ways, just quickly, the cave even better reflects the Matrix, because certainly what you said is the very popular representation of the cave. But Plato's original idea was that the prisoners in the cave were facing a wall. There was a fire kind of behind them, and there were people outside doing a kind of demonstration of shadows, like a marionette show. So it was almost like the people inside were being intentionally tricked, much like the prisoners inside the Matrix in their pods. Humanity are intentionally tricked. And more to the point, Plato said that, much like perhaps Neo at first, people aren't going to want to be taken out of that cave. A prisoner who gets taken out, who finally sees the light, is going to get such a shock, and it's going to be so weird when he sees the real reality. If he gets returned to the cave, everybody in there is going to go, this guy's gone mad. And the next person you want to drag out is going to go kicking and screaming and not wanting to go out, which is very much the sense of the Matrix as well. It's very hard to wake people up. It's very hard to pull them out of this reality. So the Matrix is clearly embedded in this kind of tradition. And so it's difficult. It's not difficult. Of course, you can watch it and just enjoy the movie, but to understand it properly and to understand perhaps its popularity, and then we'll go to simulation theory in a little bit as well, but to understand all of these ideas, these aren't modern constructs. These are ancient constructs as old as Christianity that have been repackaged in modern science fiction, like The Matrix, or like P.K. Dix was a little more spiritual. P.K. Dix feels less perhaps on the nose than The Matrix. The Matrix is this very literalized version of these things, you know, like you are in a tank, there are robots flying around, you're feeding them with your, your energy to let the system operate. That's kind of almost like a technologized allegory or analogy of what actually is being suggested, even by Dick. But certainly by the earlier Gnostics and the earlier Neoplatonists. And Buddhism has similar suggestions about the nature of reality and how you have to disconnect yourself from caring about this reality. So these concepts are very ancient concepts. And I have to put up, I don't want to be mean to Clark Kent because I don't know him, but Clark Kent said, in response to obviously the title of this episode, because we weren't talking about it yet, saying the Matrix Sci-Fi or truth or whatever we called it, question mark. It says it's fiction. That's the trouble with the world today. People have lost the ability to distinguish between what is real and what is make-believe. And while I agree with Clark Kent to a degree, I also think that the bigger problem with the world today is people have lost historical context. So if anybody had watched The Matrix who had a decent education in the 19th century, they would have known what the deeper allegorical truths were, that there was a bigger picture to these kind of ideas. But today people watch all of these things out of context. And so it's and to extrapolate just a little bit out, and then we'll move back to The Matrix. It's kind of like flying saucer belief. Everybody has to look at that in today's technologized construct. But because they mightn't have a broader understanding of the occult or fairy lore or religious traditions, they can't see that it fits a pattern which goes back thousands of years. And I think The Matrix fits a similar pattern. And so we tend to be in this postmodern world now where you can supposedly understand anything just by, you know, jumping into it randomly on Netflix. But we forget that culture isn't just randomly invented. All of these beliefs, whether they're real or whether they're fiction or whether they're religious or whether they're secular, often connect with broader strains of thinking. And in our case, when we're talking about things like the Matrix or UFOs or fairy lore or supernaturalism, these things aren't just invented whole cloth. They have this long strand that connects them to who we are as people and who we are as a culture. And we're forgetting so much of that today when we just want to jump in and just go, oh, we understand what this is today and da, da, da. No, you don't understand. You can't just assume that this is just an idea out of the Wachowski's head. This was something that they clearly had. They were aware of P.K. Dick. They were aware of Gnosticism. They were aware of Neoplatonism. They were aware of things like Baudrillard's, because who's reading Baudrillard's Simulacra Simulation or whatever that book's called, that famous postmodern book. It's in the movie anyway. And that's
I know the one you're talking
theory.
about.
Yeah, it's postmodern theory about sometimes we have a representation of something and it's different to the actual reality, but it's a simulacrum of the reality, and sometimes it becomes realer for us. It's a complicated postmodern idea. It isn't really spiritualistic, but it still injects into that idea of the nature of simulation in the Matrix. So there's lots of things happening in that movie. Whether you like the movie or whether you hate it or whether it's just, oh, it's a fun ride. This isn't just something somebody, you know, sat down one day and invented at a keyboard.
Right. And that's really, I think, the broader point of what we're talking about tonight is the impact of the film. Again, how it changed, it really did sort of change linguistically and how people thought about things, and opened a pathway into this sort of modern understanding of simulation theory, which again goes back to, congratulations, you just caught up with the last 4,000 years of theological and philosophical discussion about the nature of reality. Congratulations for catching up. But that's really what the Matrix did, is a lot of people say, oh, okay, there's another way to think about this. And quick little tidbit on the Matrix, the whole battery thing never made sense because it was never supposed to. It was originally the reason for the need of the humans were to use they were using the machines were supposed to be using the brains essentially as servers to increase the the memory so they could exist. It was never a power thing. But the studios were like, no one's going to understand this, what you're trying to do with this whole, because computers in their mind were still too new. So they went with the whole, battery thing. But but again, like you said, they come out of a tradition. A lot of people point to the Bible. I think we had a comment on that as well, right? About, that it's based on it's not, again, there are biblical themes that they definitely pull out of it. But by the time you get to Revolutions and Reloaded, it's very, very clear that is not what they're drawing from. And really, if you look at the broader mythology, at best there's allusions to Christianity, but really it's closer to, like you said, Gnosticism, which is a very different sect of Christian thought. In fact, most people don't even consider it truly Christian thought. It was one of the original heresies that the early church fought against, because it had a very different view of God, had a very different view of Jesus, had a very different view of reality. Because it was a fusion of a lot of, like you said, Neoplatonic thoughts. So, and by the time you get into those sequels, it's very clear that they're like, nope, that's not where we're going with this. And they really bring out, again, some of your more, like you said, Philip K. Dick-esque stories. By the way, have you ever read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book that Blade Runner is based on?
I think years and years ago, but so long ago I couldn't tell you anything about it. Like literally, I would have been in my teens. So.
Which is fair. I've never understood this about Hollywood. They make Philip K. Dick novels into great movies, but I've always thought Philip K. Dick was the worst sci-fi writer. His work was so bland. But like
heresy, there's your heresy right there.
Heinlein, who is the greatest of the science fiction writers, can't get a good movie made of his work.
That's
I don't get it.
But Heinlein, I mean, there's some commonalities between them because they're both influenced
absolutely
by broader thinking and they both have kind of streaks of libertarianism in their thought. And
Mhm.
I mean, I've only read one Heinlein book, in fairness, Stranger in a Strange Land, and I enjoyed it, but it wraps up.
Mhm.
I mean, this is something else I probably read after Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but certainly probably in my early 20s. I remember it wrapping up really weirdly and quickly, and it's like, what? It's almost like reading, if you read Hubbard's, what was his decology called? It's is it Mission Earth? Yeah, Battlefield Earth is the single
Yeah,
one. Mission
Battlefield
Earth's
Earth, yeah.
decology. I think Hubbard was
Mhm.
dead by the time, and they didn't want to say he was dead. Hubbard
Yeah.
was dead by the final one, and the final book of the 10 just wraps up weirdly, like without any kind of the artistry of the other books.
Mhm.
The end of Stranger in a Stranger Land felt like that to me. It felt like a very strange. Anyway,
Yes.
I
No,
don't want to do
yeah,
science fiction now.
trust me, we'll get to Heinlein. He's gonna get his own episode if I have something to say about it.
Well, we should, but I think PK Dick is an incredible writer. I think Valis, the most influential books in my life, and the audience probably don't really need
Mhm.
to know this, but would obviously be the Bible, particularly the King James version because of its artistry and majesty. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which probably marks me as my politics a little bit.
Mhm.
But Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, which set me down a more serious examination of the whole UFO phenomenon when I read that in my 20s. But at a fictional level, Valis, it was more impactful. Well, that and probably Atlas together, but Valis was incredibly
Mhm.
impactful book because I think you can read Valis, and there's other books of his at that time as well, like which were based on the similar experiences. Those books have such a potency because they're coming
Mhm.
out of PK Dick's own spiritual and psychological crisis, perhaps. They
Yeah.
don't read like ray gun science fiction. They read like
No, they
some
don't.
great existential spiritual crisis
Mhm.
manifested within the workings out of a vaguely science fiction reality. So I hate to use the word elevated science fiction because it's like using elevated horror. It just means somebody who hates horror who likes to like this film, right?
Did I
I
send
heard
that to you?
somebody said
Yeah,
that
I sent that
recently,
to
and I
you.
totally stole it. I was thinking, "Who did I steal that
Yeah.
from?" It's so true, though. Like, I know people go, "Oh, it's elevated
Yeah.
horror." Come, but I mean, Valis and the other books that Dick wrote towards the end of
Mhm.
his life, they feel like they're Gnostic texts almost. I
Yes, 100%.
the end of Valis where we realize, and I'm a spoiler for anybody, but I've been talking about this multiple times. The end of Valis where we realize Horse Lover Fat and the narrator are actually both PK Dick, and he's this kind of split personality. Almost, it's almost like a proto Fight Club in some kind of
Yeah.
weird freaking ways, right? And one of them goes out to, I don't know, to discover spiritual truth, and one of them sits at home, and it says, as for me, I sit at home and I wait and I watch the TV and I wait for the signs. I follow the commission. And it's
Mhm.
like this incredible spiritual just punch in the mouth at the end. And there's a connection with it, which is perhaps more potent than that connection with the Matrix. There's a connection of somebody who understands this reality is totally not right, but he's waiting for that final message to somehow
Yeah.
come through to him. And it almost, to me, and this is blasphemy, I know, Valis is almost a religious text to me. When I read that book, it had such an incredible influence on me. And some of my Christianity already lent in a Gnostic way. Like the Gospel of John is the
Mhm.
most Gnostic of the Gospels, and it was always my favorite gospel. It has
Mhm.
more, there's a more a mystical tone to that book. But certainly, and it sounds very weird because it's a science fiction book, but there's something about that
Mhm.
book which is some of the most potent fiction I've ever read. And I've also talked to people who go, Valis is rubbish. So maybe it's just psychology, maybe it just clicks with some
Mhm.
people, other people it doesn't click with. But
Right. It's like,
so that
it's sort of like, All Along the Watchtower. There's two kinds of people in the world. The people who understand that song, and it cannot be explained, but you either understand the song or you don't. And you can't explain it to people. Somebody like, "Yeah, it's a good song." It's like, "No, you don't get it. It's not just a good song. It is a religious experience in a way. There is way more to that song, but you can't explain it because in many ways it's not the original version that
Jimi
Bob
Hendrix, or was it
no,
who did
Jimi
the first
Hendrix
one?
is yeah, no, Bob Dylan wrote the song.
Right, I think you're
He
right,
did
yeah.
the song originally. Jimi Hendrix
He
did
owns the
something
song.
entirely.
Yeah.
Like
He
I
owns
mean,
the
he did
song.
something when he transformed that song to something mystical, and it's like you either get it or you don't. And there's no explanation for it. It's something that you feel and experience. So I understand what you're saying, but
When I hear
I
that
was
song
gonna say
just quick
I agree with with Donnie on this one.
Well, I think
we're just breaking his heart tonight, Donnie.
Oh no, you're not breaking my heart. I understand that Donnie has a fascination with Philip's last name, just in general. So anyway, sorry, Donnie, I love you. You know I do. But speaking of All Along the Watchtower, this is more. I'm on a personal rant tonight. Whenever I hear that song or anybody say that song, I can't help but think of Withnell and I. When Withnell and I, in the great 80s comedy movie with Richard E. Grant, and who's the other actor? I forget him. I forget his name. But he's both.
I don't think I ever saw it.
It's the greatest British comedy movie ever made. Maybe the greatest comedy movie ever made. The darkest, greatest, just most depressing comedy movie you've ever seen, which makes it sound like, how's that funny? It's a movie called Withnell and I, and there's a scene where they leave London. It's in like the late 60s, so it captures this cultural moment of kind of the whole hippie era kind of, I don't know, kind of failing. Whatever. When they leave London for a holiday, they need to go on vacation. And I'm almost positive, I haven't watched the movie since I've lived in America now. I've never seen it anywhere here. I need to buy a copy. Anyway, when they leave London, All Along the Watchtower is playing, and there's kind of like a wrecking ball destroying houses or buildings in the neighborhood they're in, and it kind of spells, I guess, and of course it's almost like a Hunter S. Thompson novel as well, almost, because they're constantly alcohol or substance infused, so their whole reality is always shaky, and they make bad decisions, but it's hilarious. Watch Withnell and I, Jason.
Okay.
Any adult here in the audience should watch Withnell and I if they haven't seen it.
Okay, there you go. So back to the Matrix and stuff, we should probably set a few things here about the actual film.
Like two things.
Yeah, like two things. Like you said, it became sort of, in many ways, a cultural touchstone in ways that we're just sort of understanding. But I think the bigger point is it introduced the concept, right? Really, it's a very theist concept. Obviously we're going to get to simulation theory here in a second, but it sort of opened up a way of explaining those concepts to a population that has been, let's be honest, last century has been dumbed down from a philosophical perspective. And obviously, to your point, the Matrix didn't create anything new. It just repurposed very, very old thoughts. Absolutely. A lot of really old concepts, and just repackaged it. As so much of the mid to late 20th century philosophical and theological upheavals they've been just really rehashes of older thoughts, some of which were sort of discounted for centuries.
And we should just quickly say, just on that note, that when I talk about Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and then we jump to Philip K. Dick, there's a long line in between isn't it? Philip K. Dick rediscovered these things. There's, as you mentioned before, Christian heresies like Manichaeism. There's a Catholic heresy. They all were essentially Gnostic in their thinking. René Descartes, the famous 17th century French philosopher, who's one of his most famous treatises is about how do we not know that there is an evil genius or demon that controls this whole reality, and it's essentially just us and the evil demon? And that's where Descartes' thing, where it kind of proves his own existence, which everybody's heard. I think, therefore I am, that therefore at least you exist. But how do you prove that the rest of existence is real? That very much is that type of thought as well. By the 1970s, as technology got higher, these things had always been, because anybody who's ever done philosophy has been called Plato and has been taught Descartes. But by the 1970s, there was serious thought experiments done in, I think, philosophy departments. I can't even remember the guy who came up with the idea initially, but the idea that how don't we, riffing on Descartes, riffing on these old ideas, called BrainInAVat experiments, like thought experiments. How do we not know that we're not just a brain in a vat somewhere, or we're not just a comatose patient on a hospital table, and electrodes are stimulating our brain and giving us all of these kind of ideas? So all of that was very well known culturally for anybody paying attention by the time P.K. Dick writes his stuff, and certainly by the time The Matrix comes out. So there's a very long tradition going, particularly throughout the West, but as we mentioned before, even in the East, which segues, or which we can segue into if we want to, but which is clearly part of the Matrix type of storyline, that we might just all be prisoners in this reality, and something is keeping us imprisoned, and our main goal is to get out and maybe if there's like a Christian type or a Gnostic Christian type commission, maybe it's to let other people know as well, so other people can get out the way. In the Matrix, they're trying to get people out of the tanks. So this stuff is all, it's a long tradition. So we should say that as well. Instead of just quoting Gnosticism and then saying Matrix, or there's a long line in between. Historically,
well, and it's very Buddhist in that manner as well, where it's about escaping this cycle of reincarnation to attain nirvana, right? You're leaving this universe to get to the real universe, right? To it again, like you said, very, very long list of ideas and theologies and philosophies that it comes out of. But getting back to the idea of the Matrix itself as a film, I'm probably one of the only people I know that actually liked the sort of the climax scene of the second film. I can never remember if it was Reloaded or I can never get those two correct, like which one went first. But when he's sitting down talking to the architect is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire trilogy. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The Matrix 1, it should have just ended, that we should not have gotten the next two films. That would have been perfect, in my opinion, but, no one ever asked what I want. But I loved that scene with the architect because he's talking to the architect and all the screens around them, right, are essentially showing all of his potential reactions. And what it does is it focuses in on the one screen where that's what his real reaction is. But what they're playing out is, no, is that Neo himself is a creation of the whole system that he's thought he was fighting the entire time, that he actually serves a role within the Matrix, and that what he thought was his free will, what he thought was his own actions, were actually always part of a control system, that the resistance itself, the people fighting the robots, they thought they were really, it's like, no, you were part of a heat sink, essentially. A way to get people out of the Matrix who would collapse the Matrix. And they're like, but here's the thing, at a certain point, it will collapse on itself. So we have to start this whole process over again. And we've gotten very, very good at it. Right. Yeah. So it's not showing past versions of himself. It's showing all of his potential responses. And the thing they're saying is the architect knows what his responses are because they created him. That's sort of the whole point. Is one of the big questions of the film is what is control and what does choice even mean? Right. Again, what is the nature of reality? That's the whole point of Cypher in the first film, is saying what is really real. And that's echoed at the resolution of the third film, right? Again, at this point, it is a classic film, so no spoilers ahead for a 20-year-old movie.
I don't know if 2 and 3 are classics. I wouldn't go that far, but
they're slightly less than 20 years old now, I think. But the third film, when they win, by the way, I'm sorry, but they pulled the same crap that they did in the new Star Wars sequel, where the generals not the generals, but the council and the people in control were all idiots, and if they had been left up to them, everyone was going to be killed straight up. But that's a whole different kettle of fish.
I haven't seen any of the new Star Wars movies, so
you're better off. Don't see them. Just stay away. But anyway, my point is the whole thing about, at the end, Morpheus asks, "Is this real?" Because we've got peace with the machines, and he's like, "Well, is it real?" That question is supposed to bother you in the same way. We look at Romeo and Juliet as a love story, and it's not. It was never designed to be a love story. You were supposed to look at this whole situation and be like, this scene is screwed up. That is clearly what Shakespeare, again, whether your view on who Shakespeare is or not, but the writer was trying to get you to the idea that, hold on, this Romeo dude's is a nut job. He's flaky. We shouldn't be trusting him, and she's really young. Like these thoughts are supposed to be there, but we sort of mask over all those things. In the same way, when Morpheus says, "Is this real?" it is meant to bother, saying, well, hold on, what is real? We've been assuming that when they're in Zion, that they're in the real world, or that this was all, we're supposed to assume these things, but there's hints throughout the series that maybe it's not what it appears to be. And even the idea, if you just say, no, Zion is real, okay, it's fine. But this idea of peace, is the peace itself even real? The question of the film is, what really constitutes reality? And Cypher's whole point is ignorance is bliss. He's like, I don't even want to know that there's a question, right? I just want to go back to living a life that I can enjoy. I don't care what reality is. That scene is, again, one of the highlights of the entire trilogy, where he's sitting there smoking a cigar and he's like, I want to be somebody important, like an actor, right? And he's just eating this steak that, again, he knows doesn't exist, but he doesn't care anymore. And there's that, and I think they did do a really good job of presenting that question to you. It's like, well, hold on, but if you know what you're doing and what you're engaging in isn't actually real, and how you define real, does it still matter? Well, most people are going to be like, you know what? If I get to have fun, I don't care, right? That's what he symbolizes, is the willingness for us to betray ourselves and our friends for pleasure that isn't real, that we know isn't real, but we'll still do it, right? And yet, even at the end of it, one of the heroes of the film or of the series is asking, but is the suffering I went through even real? Did I achieve anything of any real value? You're not really supposed to be 100% certain by the end of the trilogy.
Well, to be honest, I can't remember the second or third movie at all. I saw them when they came out at the cinema, and they made such a little impact on me that I never revisited them. And I certainly never saw. Didn't they reboot the thing like a few years ago?
I saw it. It's bad.
I don't watch any reboots. They're all bad. I don't think there's a. I'll go so far as to say I don't think there's been a great tentpole studio movie made in, I don't know, well over a decade, to put it kindly.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. I saw it. Let me tell you this. It hurts worse because there's some really solidly, really good ideas, and there's some really good work done in it. And it's like, okay, so there is really room for some genius here. And then they just grab it and they chuck it out the window. And then it goes 5 stories down and is crawling for its life, hoping that someone will help it. And they back a tractor trailer over it, and then they run it back over it again. Then they set it on fire by the end of the film. It's so bad. Like I said, it's sort of like We Built This City on Rock and Roll. The song shouldn't be one of the worst songs because it's a fine song. The problem is it was done by Jefferson Starship, which was formerly Jefferson Airplane, and they played it friggin' what's the band, I just forgot it, not Hollywood. They played help me out here, chat. The big
sure,
oh my gosh,
no, I'm not sure what you're pointing me at though. I might be
no, I'm looking. The chat will know. The Jefferson Airplane played at Woodstock. There it is.
Oh,
Woodstock.
okay. I was
like They Built This City on Rock and Roll is a decent pop song. The problem is it was done by a band that knew better. They knew better than to make that song. The fourth Matrix movie is that. It's like there's like they took these really great ideas and they just destroyed them. A really solid first act, and they just trash it. And it's like, you knew better. Y'all really knew better than to make this film, but you did it anyway. And it's an insult. But back to the good part of the Matrix,
we've had a few people. D. Mitchell said, I think somebody else might have as well, making reference to Baudrillard as well, which was certainly a key text. When I was doing my PhD, actually back in the day, Baudrillard, some of Baudrillard's, and I'm not a postmodernist, but it was very difficult to write a book, to write a dissertation and not look at postmodernism, because some of it explains some of the weirdness in modern culture pretty well. And Baudrillard's books are definitely worth reading, although they're also, I suppose, if you're not in academia, just like, what the hell is this person talking about? Because there's a language,
if you're in academia, it's like, what the
there's a language that postmodernists use which is almost intentionally, it's almost intentionally difficult in some ways, because if you aren't versed in it, it's not. I don't think it's, put it this way. I don't think postmodernism intellectually or academically was healthy, but certainly they had some very significant points to use about power and about space in the postmodern world, which was relevant to looking, I think, at UFO history, but certainly relevant at looking at the Matrix as well. And yes, as D. Mitchell says, Baudrillard's text was definitely influential, as was a lot of the Gnosticism.
Oh yeah,
we've been talking
oh
about.
No, 100%. Real quick, D. Mitchell points out that he's heard the newest Matrix film was intentionally bombed by the one Wachowski. It wasn't both of them. To make us, they said they bombed it to make a statement. No idea if that's true or not. Look, all I'm going to say is, I hope that's true. Like that would give me a little bit of hope, because there's some really clever talk. Again, that first act is really, really solid of the new film, and there's a few scenes after that that are really solid, really well acted, and really great ideas. And the movie just trashes all of it, just throws all of that away. So I really hope.
Wachowski movies became crapper as well. What's the movie I was really looking forward to it because the score was fantastic and the trailer was fantastic. It had Tom Hanks, and it's kind of almost about like reincarnation, and there are people appearing in different lives. Or
yeah.
It was a big movie in about 2012, In fact, I went to see it when I was in Burbank, I think in 2012. It had just come out. I was super excited. And I walked out of there going, I couldn't have been more. This might be around the time I stopped watching tentpole movies, right? Because it was so bad. I used to be a tentpole boy. I'd get excited. I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s. So when the Jaws has come out and the Close Encounters and the Star Wars and the Empires, and it's go, go, go. And now, like again, but the Wachowskis aren't the only people to continue to sink at the tentpole movies, because I just don't think they're any good.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. It's like,
what was it? The Chattel.
Yeah,
the score was amazing. Like I remember the music just in the trailer being really emotionally like powerful, and the imagery in the trailer just being quite the.
I never saw it. I know which one you're talking about. I never.
It was horrible.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel.
So I'm not surprised the new Matrix is horrible either, because I think that was their last big sci-fi movie before.
Cloud Atlas. Thank you, D. Mitchell.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad.
Well, the problem was I kept thinking like Atlas. Like I know it's not Atlas Shrugged, but I couldn't get Atlas Shrugged out of my head because it was Cloud Atlas. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, the Matrix in many ways, its real impact is that it sort of reintroduced these concepts, these much older ideas, to a new audience that honestly their education system has failed them by not telling them these ideas existed in the first place, and has sort of set up in many ways the acceptance of of simulation theory, which I know is one of those things that Dean loves so much.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in it the same way I'm interested in the Matrix and P.K. Dick and Rene Descartes and BrainInAVat, because I like to see this intellectual tradition. I find it fascinating that ideas that still had enough potency thousands of years ago, or almost thousands of years, or well over 1,000 years ago, to cause Christian heresies and to get like whole villages wiped out for believing in it, right? That those ideas still resonate now. And again, it comes back to what I was talking about UFOs before, and the ignorance of fairy faith, or the ignorance of other supernatural or paranormal or mythological systems that a lot of UFO apparitions and UFO experiences fit into. I think the attraction of simulation theory goes above and beyond that. Our technology is where it's at now, that people like Elon Musk can imagine that we mightn't be in base reality. It ties in, at least to me, to older traditions, which whether there's any objective truth to them or not, for some reason are very attractive to the human psyche. The idea that this reality mightn't be real, the idea when it comes to UFO belief and fairies and the like, that there might be other entities that interact with us. Whatever the truth of these is, it's clearly a psychologically attractive archetype which punches into us again and again. And so I think in many ways, if you understand that UFO belief isn't brand new and goes back thousands of years, or vice versa, if you understand that the ideas put forward in simulation theory or in the Matrix, 10, 20 years beforehand. If you can understand that either of those goes back for a long time, it helps you to begin to look at all of these kind of way out there ideas and not just look at them in this little contemporaneous bubble to think that, oh, this is just something that some scientists came up with now. Maybe this isn't reality, or this is just something UFO researchers came up with in the late 1940s, early 50s, that we're being visited by non-human beings. When you put it in a bigger context, it makes sense. And I think it also stops one, or helps one, from jumping to the most popular explanation of whatever these things are today, when you can see that people have thought similar thoughts since people started thinking thoughts,
Right.
so
No,
you
exactly.
can go, let me put a hold on my belief system for a minute and see where this fits in with a bigger intellectual or spiritual stream.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's, like I said, every time I hear, people saying, what about simulation theory? I'm like, yeah, congratulations. You caught up on 4,000 years of philosophical and theological, exploration. Like, I'm sorry, you're not special. Like, it's just not. It's just a modern reimagining of what everyone else has been saying. Again, not unique to Christian thought by any stretch of the imagination. The idea that this is a lower reality, that there's higher realities, that there are beings that have greater understanding of our universe, that created our universe and interact in our universe in ways that essentially have admin access. That's the basic concept. Like, well, yeah, congratulations. Everyone's thought that. It just, in many ways, it just sort of allows people to couch these ideas within a modern acceptability. That's all it is. In fact, that's what a lot of, and we've talked about this a lot, calling something a paranormal entity is, or an interdimensional being, is just couching the phrase the supernatural or angel in a more or demon in a more technologically modern acceptability. That's all you're doing. You're trying to create the illusion of scientific acceptability when that's all that is. You're not saying anything substantively different. You're just trying to whitewash these ideas with modern terminology to make you feel better about what you're dealing with, and perhaps even give you a sense of control, or that you somehow have a better understanding of this than people who lived 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, right? That's all it really is. It's the hubris of modernity that allows us to repaint these ideas with modern jargon and pretend that we've done something special.
And good writers understand the potency of archetypes. So the Matrix, for example, what's the Hugo Weaving character called? Like Agent Smith
Agent
or something?
Smith. Yeah, Agent Smith.
Like, that is literally just modern cinematic realization of the idea of the archons, which were part of the Gnostic tradition, which kept us trapped here and didn't want us to go to the light. So I think whatever the true reality is, if any writers are out there listening, the best advice is find potent archetypal stories which come down from thousands of years, and then weave it into your current plot that you're developing, or develop a plot around it, and you'll have a very successful movie, because we're psychologically wired towards certain ideas, certain archetypes, as Jung would have said, or certain patterns, certain beliefs. And you see it again and again. You see things which resonate really well with an audience because they've resonated down through humanity since time immemorial.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the modern Christian parlance of the God-shaped hole, right? I mean, in Romans, Paul says, look, everyone knows that this is reality. Like everyone understands this on a base level. There, a lot of, again, most philosophers have said, look, we are called essentially to the supernatural, to the greater mystery of life, that it is an inborn human need to search that out and basically understand it, but that we often are distracted in, again, like Sci-Fi, right, we cling to and embrace these distractions from true reality to hide within the illusion of this world. That's why Cypher is there. He is to tell us this is what most people actually kind of want. We know something's wrong. We know this is not what it's supposed to be. This is not the way things are. We know that this is a lie. And yet, particularly when it becomes particularly egregious when people who've seen the truth and they're like, yeah, I don't want this. I would rather grab onto the illusion and serve the illusion than the reality. Right? That's why Cypher is there. That's what he symbolizes. But the simple fact of the matter is that's what everyone has described, that so many people, and we are tempted by the distractions of this world to hide within the world away from true reality.
Isn't that the attraction of non-realities today? The attraction of video gaming, the attraction of, it's a family show, so I won't say the term, but adult type of entertainment, which isn't real, but lets people disappear into another reality. Isn't that even isn't that even what social media is today? The presentation of a different, more perfect version of oneself. Yeah. So don't get me wrong, there are people out there who use social media in other ways to say how horrible their life is, so they get people, giving them hugs, hearts, and everything else. But generally speaking, most people present a non-realistic presentation on social reality. Most people who have a level of high esteem want to present themselves, or even medium esteem, want to present their life as really good. They're showing photos of when they're having fun, when they're at the beach, yada, yada, yada. They want to present a perfected version of their own life, much the way that movies cut to just the good stuff and don't show the boring stuff. But today we ourselves are weaving these narratives through video games, through adult entertainment, through social media presentations. And that's the danger of things like, as ridiculous as it sounds, like Zuckerberg's Meta thing, the idea that somehow we can become, have a community within this virtual space. And incidentally, how many people today have friends online that they've never met? Almost everybody, right?
Yeah. We've never met. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so this matrix reality, or this simulation reality, is, because of technology, is becoming closer. I don't think that's going to be a simulation theory reality. I think it just lets us delve into these places which you actually couldn't build your own reality when you were in ancient Greece or the ancient, in ancient Israel. How would you build a fake reality and jump into it? You had a very real pressing reality around you all the time. Now we actually do build our own fake realities and intertwine ourselves with other people's fake realities. So maybe whatever the truth, spiritually or otherwise, maybe there's a metaphor here that can ring home to all of us, to try to ground yourself in a reality where your real life, your real family, your real friends, your real existence is more important than whatever you want to masquerade in all of these other things available to you today, which seem lovely, but you end up not having a real life. You have something else. You have a simulated life. Even if we're not living in a simulation, it's what it becomes.
Yes. No, 100%, which is, again, in many ways, the broader point of the Matrix and all of these other philosophies, is to say, hey, you have to break out of the illusion of this world and embrace the reality of it, the higher reality, because that's ultimately what you were made for. Again, we'll take the second two movies where you're supposed to question if there was ever a real reality to begin with. We'll put that to the side for a moment. Everyone is, all of these thoughts say, no, there is something higher that you're supposed to work for. You're supposed to grasp for. You're supposed to reach out for those things. And that is the highest, that's sort of the highest goal that any human should have, but that you have to make the choice to do so, because otherwise, you're going to choose to be like Cypher and give it all up for the illusion of happiness. And again, it's the admission that most people probably just want the illusion, but that can't deter you from choosing the higher goal.
Absolutely. Perfect ending to the show, Jason.
Well, thank you. I try.
Well, I guess until next week then. What are we doing next week? We're doing the new Small Town Monsters film next week, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, we are. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one because again, Small Town Monsters always does a great job with their work. It's always a pleasure to work, to watch their stuff and review it. So I'm really looking forward to it. And you got the screener version, so we'll see. It comes out today, doesn't it?
I think yeah, we were thinking about doing it today, but we were doing the Matrix things. We'll do it next week. It's dropped now, so people can go and check out the new Small Town Monsters flick as well. What's the title of it again? I forget. I don't have my Facebook open.
Just had it.
Just go to the Small Town Monsters page. It'll be there front and center.
Yeah, I was going to see if I could look it up, but I just realized I have your link. So on that note, again, go to Small Town Monsters. They'll tell you what it is, and we'll talk about that next week. So thank y'all for watching. We love y'all, and we'll catch y'all next time behind the old card catalog. See ya.